Hello, welcome to RC Video Reviews. Today we're taking a look at the 70-inch slick by Extreme Flight. Before we get too far into the content, one of the things I'm going to tell you about stock levels at Extreme Flight is that Apple has nothing on these guys. It's very difficult sometimes to find these planes in stock, and I can tell you almost as fast as this model came into stock, it went back out again because people snap them up. I often get comments about, well, that's great, except it's not in stock and I can't buy it. The only thing I can tell you, if that's your comment, is that you are going to have to keep an eye on their container schedule. You're going to have to sign up to be notified when this model is back in stock. And when they get it back in stock, you do not have time to mess around. You're going to have to place your order and pay them the money if you want a chance of getting this plane. That's all I can really say about it. They are constantly bringing inventory in, and just as fast as they bring it in, it heads out the door. So if you want to get one, you got to pay attention to their website and get your credit card out and be ready to order when they show up. All right, let's get into the material. Now, if you watch the channel, you know that recently I've been getting into the 67-inch airframe size, and I've had nothing but high praise for those. And you might be saying, but wait a minute, John, we thought you said 67-inch was the perfect size, and it is very good. 70-inch, just a little bit bigger. And I have a strategy on this plane that's a little unconventional. We'll talk about that as we go through the first look. Let's start out by taking a look at the wings, and in typical Extreme Flight fashion, the wings are just fantastic. The shrink covering scheme is amazing. You simply can't go wrong with orange, white, and blue. I'm sorry. I'm a Gator and I love that color scheme. So orange, white, and blue, just love it. And a very nice pop of contrast there on the bottom. Great big white panel with a bright orange and blue color pop on the wingtips. I know it's going to look fantastic. And if we look at the servo mounts, we can see the servo opening is already cut out. And the holes are even pre-drilled for the servo screws themselves. And you can see the reinforcement plate right there on top of the servo opening. So very well done. And then on the bottom, we have two slots for the control horn. And as you can see, the wings are already hinged and sealed. This type of thing is just a time saver when you're putting together an ARF. You can see the pins are already installed. The seal is covered with shrink covering. It's just beautiful. The wing covering on this wing is just fantastic. And then on the top, we also have a seal, so just saves time. That's all there is to it, just saves you some time. On the wing tips, you've got the screws for the thumb screws that allow you to put on the side force generators if you want to use those. And then we'll take a look down the leading edge just to make sure everything looks nice and straight, and I see nothing there that's concerning. Yeah, that looks very good to me. Yep, very straight. And then on the trailing edge, we'll do the same thing. I don't see anything on the trailing edge that's cause for concern. It looks very straight to me. Very well done. Nice covering job, nice straight wing. Oh, one other thing, the quick release mechanism on the wing, very beefy bolt that they use there. You can see the bolt right there with a nut that allows you to adjust the tension for the wing to the fuselage. I found that on Extreme Flight out of the box, they tend to be pretty good, so I probably won't fiddle with that, but you can if you want to. And the big beefy bolt to hold that wing in place. And here's the port wing. We'll just take a quick look at this one. Graphic scheme, awesome, no question about it. And then there's the bottom of the wing. And of course, all the same features that we talked about on the starboard wing are there. Pre-hinged, sealed, control horn slots are cut, servo opening is opened. And we even have a reinforcement plate right there on the root and a couple of incidence pins, one on the front, one on the back, that just keeps the wing lined up correctly on the airframe. So excellent. Next up is a horizontal stabilizer, and I'll tell you guys, I love this format because here's what they've done. Number one, you don't have to cut any of the film. It's already cut open for you for gluing, right? That's already done. And if you look on the inside edge of this key slot, that cut is just perfect. You can't do it any better than that. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about Extreme Flight. You might be able to do it as well, but I don't think you can do it any better. And so we got this keyway that's open, and the way this works is this slots into the fuselage, and because of the way the horizontal stabilizer is cut, offering this little center section, you just slide it in, and it is a self-aligning and self-locking mechanism. So a little bit of high-sol or epoxy or CA or whatever your method is, you put that on the wood surface on the top and bottom, slide that in, and you are pretty much assured that you're going to be equidistant from the leading edge of the horizontal stabilizer to the trailing edge of the wing, and you don't have to worry too much about that. I check it anyway, but so far I've never had a problem when they key it like this. So it's just really nicely done. And again, The horizontal stabilizer and the elevator are hinged and sealed. So there are the pin hinges, and as you can see, there's shrink covering right there on the gap. So just absolutely beautiful, full deflection. Look at that, isn't that cool? Full deflection all the way up. Very, very nice. And then on the bottom of the stabilizer, the same type of color scheme we saw on the wings, bright white in the center and a color pop out on the tips, which is awesome for visibility. Love that. And you can see the slots are cut for the dual control horn on the elevator. Very nicely done. Here's the rudder, and we can see the pin hinges already installed there, and I'm checking to see if they're glued in. Yes, they are. They're already glued in, so very simple assembly here. All you've got to do is put your epoxy in the holes for the rudder pins, and then just slide those rudder pins right in there, and this is as easy as it gets. So excellent work there on the part of Extreme Flight. They really are taking care of all the trivial little details that aren't highly meaningful when you're building a plane. I mean, anybody should be able to install a pin hinge, but at this point, it's just nice when it's done for you because it simply saves you the time. And of course, they're going to be measured out in space perfectly. So beautiful, beautiful job there. And also the color scheme looks perfect on the back. And I'm sure that's going to blend in just perfectly with the vertical stabilizer on the plane. And just in case you want to see it, there is a look at the trailing edge that looks perfectly straight. And the leading edge, a little harder to see because of the blue counterweight up top, but that looks very straight to me as well. So no problems there on the rudder, it looks great. Next up, we've got the cowl, and of course the cowl is painted to match the graphics on the plane, the shrink covering on the plane, and I don't see any issues so far. Let's just turn it around. Notice that there's a pre-drilled hole right there on the bottom, and that matches up with the fuselage, so it screws right in. You set it on the plane and you just screw it in from the firewall, and it's just perfect, no issues there. They do include a baffling, so if you want to glue a baffle in on the cowl opening up front, you can do that. I don't know why they didn't take care of that for us already, slackers. Why didn't they glue that? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yeah, if you want to put some air cooling in, you've got the ability to do that with this little piece of clear plastic. So yep, the cowl looks absolutely perfect, and the color matching is excellent. Looks great up against the airframe itself. Now for the fuselage. I really like the latches they use on the fuselage because they're a very positive locking mechanism. So you just pull that pin out and slide it back, and then you can lift the canopy off. And nice job inside the canopy. You've got a decorative carbon fiber weave looking deck plate. If you want to put a pilot in there, you can. And then when you look inside, you've got a cockpit with aviation style instruments and that blue square in the center that looks a little like an iMac pattern. So kind of cool, neat. Neat little homage to the hobby there. And then the Extreme Flight logo right there on the dashboard. So the canopy looks great. This may look a little hazy, but that's because of the protective film. I can tell you that underneath that film, it's very clear. So it's just a protective film. That's why you see a little bit of haze when you look through it on the camera there. Here's a look inside the fuselage, and I always enjoy checking out the build quality of Extreme Flight planes because everything is just so well done. The wing quick release is right here on the side, and the way that works, you pull the pin out, you slide that release up, and you can see this tab pops up, and the idea behind that is it keeps you from putting the canopy down and latching it if your wings aren't locked on the airframe. It's a feature I really like about Extreme Flight planes. It's just awesome to have that kind of safety feature there. It just keeps you in check. And as we mentioned, we've got the canopy latches right here on the back, and those work by pulling the pin out, and then you slide that fore and aft. So a very positive locking canopy mechanism on these planes. It is pretty good. Pretty much everywhere you look on this fuselage, you see this combination of wood and fiberglass fusion where they sandwich it together for extra strength. You've got it up here on the motor box, on the firewall, on the canopy deck, on the equipment deck inside, and then all the way back we see the fiberglass and fiberglass strips going down the length of the plane and even on the spars in the back. There's a little bit of foam here for sound deadening and probably for some structure for the covering, so that's what that's there for. And then if you look inside, there's another piece of foam right here, and that's in front of the air outlet. Unfortunately, they didn't open up the air outlet, so you have to cut that yourself. Don't forget to do that, by the way. You have to create egress for airflow, so make sure you do that on your plane. You can see from the bottom, there are no openings on the bottom, so you'll be left to do that when you're putting it together. Here's a look at the starboard side of the fuselage. Give you a nice close-up there so you can check out the graphics. Just beautiful. And of course, the application quality of the shrink covering is fantastic. And there's that opening in the back we talked about for the horizontal stabilizer. This is the keyed area that ensures you have a square horizontal stabilizer when you install it in the plane. And of course, there's a little beauty block, so you remove that, put your stabilizer in, and then you glue that beauty block in place just to close the gap. And here's the port side of the fuselage. Again, just a quick look to give you a look at the graphics and to make sure everything looks tidy, and of course it does. No issues there at all. I like to check and see how these spar tubes fit inside the fuselage. Hopefully they're snug but not too tight. And as you can see, I'm sliding that in with just a little bit of finger pressure, so I don't have any problems there. That's fine. Next up is the landing gear, and just like all the other extreme flight planes I have, carbon fiber gear. You know, I've never really pranged one in, but there's a little bit of flexibility, but there's no question this is a very strong landing gear. Here are the wheel pants, painted a bright, bright orange. They look very nice indeed, no problems there. And here's the other one, real quick look at those. Beautiful wheel pants, no runs, no orange peel. The paint looks really, really good. And another nod to extreme flight, having the factory do some of the work that can be a little tedious when you're putting these together. On the landing gear cuffs, they already glued on the rubber seal, and there's the seam. Now, I've glued a lot of these on, and no matter what my best efforts, I can never get the seam quite that nice, but it looks perfect. So that's what you'd expect from a factory job. But yeah, that rubber seal is already glued on, just another job they save you from doing. And it's true for both of them, of course. Now let's talk about hardware and one of the things that I'm going to be trying out on this plane. First up, there's the spinner. So this is available on the Extreme Flight website. This is the blue to match the blue scheme on the airplane itself. So carbon fiber spinner, aluminum backplate, and in my experience, these things are about as straight as they come. I've never had a problem with one of these being out of balance. So I do appreciate the quality that they put into these carbon fiber spinners, and I do like that they're matched to the paint scheme on the plane. So it's just a nice little finishing touch on the front of the plane. For servos, I'll be using the Savox 1270 TGs. As you can see on the box, they're rated up to 8.4 volts, and I will be using 8.4 volts of output on my DEC because that's how we maximize the torque and the speed on the servos. So 8.4 volts, Savox 1270 TGs. I got 4 of those. And to match up with the servos, you need some servo arm extensions. I got these in blue. They're 1.5 inches and 25T to match up with the Savox servos. 4 of those are required, 1 for each aileron, and then the elevator and rudder, and they're all the same size, all 1.5 inch. So you need 4 of those. You'll need servo extensions as well, 24 inch for the elevator, 24 inch for the rudder. 3 inch from the receiver to the deck plate. So one of the nice features on Extreme Flight is you can actually epoxy in the male side of a receiver extension. So when you take the wings and remove them from the airplane and put them back on, you can plug them in one-handed by gluing in the male side of the wire. So this goes to your receiver. You need 2 of those, and then 6-inch extensions that will go on the servo wire from the servo itself to make sure they're long enough to actually reach through the wing and inside the airframe. So a couple of servo extensions, you need 2 of those, 6 inches each, for the servos on the ailerons. Quick look at the side force generators, and I noticed they're not the quick release style. That's a little bit of a bummer. I like those. They're keyed, so this doesn't have that key. That means not quick release. That means the thumb screws got to come all the way out, and then you add the side force generator and put the thumb screws all the way back in. A little bit of a bummer, that's not a quick release, but I don't really use side force generators too much these days anyway. In terms of the radio system, I'll be using a Radiomaster ER6 Express LRS receiver. I also have a power distribution board that I can use for the servos, and as you can see, I've got an XT30 connector, so I can connect a 2S battery and use that for power. I'm not sure if I'm going to use that yet because the ESC I have is capable of 15 amps of continuous and 20 amps of peak, so I might just go with the ESC. I'm not sure yet. Jury's out on that one. Stand by. I mentioned earlier a little bit of a conflict between a 67 and a 70, and here's the deal. There's a breakpoint right now based on the power systems available for electric between 67-inch airplanes and 70-inch airplanes, and that is the motor. So right now, there is an AM670 motor. This is intended for a 67-inch airplane, but when you look at the power to weight and the thrust capabilities of this motor, it should be able to haul this plane around, especially given the fact that this motor weighs less than the recommended motor, and we're going to use 1 less battery. That's the real key for me. I don't mind flying with 2 batteries in series, but that's a little bit of an effort. You got to charge 2 batteries, you're dealing with 2 batteries inside the plane. What I'm after is to find out if I can power this plane with a power system designed for a single 6S battery. And I think we can. I think it'll work. So this is the AM670 motor. It will be flying with 6S, which means 1 battery. So at the moment, this is like the largest airframe I know of in the 3D space, where you might be able to get away with flying with a single 6S battery and still have the power you want for any crazy maneuvers that you might be interested in doing. So there's a quick look at the AM670 motor. This is a T-Motor product, and it is available on the Extreme Flight website. For the ESC, I'll be using the AM116, and this one is capable of 116 amps, and as I mentioned prior, you can configure it to output 8.4 volts, and I will definitely be doing that. Now, a little bit more on the power setup. I actually went out and got a badass Power Systems prop. This is a 19x8 wood prop. It's got white tips, black paint, red lettering. I got this one because that motor is capable of spinning a 19-inch prop. So while I also got the 18-inch carbon fiber T-motor prop that comes with the AM670 normally, and isn't that a work of art? Just an absolutely beautiful prop. So I have an 18.8 and I've got a 19.8. My plan is to try the 18.8 first and see what I think. I'll bring the 19.8 with me in case I feel like it's too far underpowered. But that motor is capable of spinning both the 18.8 and the 19.8. So that is the T-motor carbon fiber prop that I'll be putting on the plane, at least to start. And to round out the hardware, you also need some motor standoffs. This is the Blazing Star large set. I love these because they have a very granular control over how long these extensions are based on the size of the cut pieces here on the end. So you can remove those to bring them down to make it fit the way you want. So I use these on any of my extreme flight planes that require motor standoffs. In terms of the hardware kit, this is for the battery area. There's a little plate. I'm not exactly sure. It's a covering plate of some sort. I'm not sure where that goes yet. I'll figure it out later. And a couple Velcro strips to cinch your battery down. Here's a little bit of hardware for an IC setup in case you need to run a throttle setup on your plane. Got thumb screws for the side force generators. The tail wheel assembly pretty much already put together. Minor work to install that. Then we've got a couple of bags, one marked main wheel, so that's to put your landing gear together. And then we've got the main wing hardware. Check that out. They already screwed the ball link connectors onto the shafts. Nice. That's another job that just takes a little bit of time. You know, it takes a little time. I'm really appreciative of that kind of effort. Here's the bag for the stabilizer, and here's the bag for the rudder. And then we've got a couple of other miscellaneous pieces for the cowling, for the wheel pants, and for the main landing gear. This is the part that screws the main landing gear onto the fuselage, of course. We already talked about the axles. That's the main wheel, so a little bit different. It's a very nice touch when they label the bags like this, because while you're doing your assembly, you just keep everything in the bag, and then when you get to a particular portion of the assembly, you hunt down the parts that you need for that one, and your job done. This actually follows some of the really nice helicopter kits that do a great job of labeling the hardware in a helicopter kit, so I really do appreciate that as well. Of course, we've got a couple of wheels for the landing gear, and they also include a couple of small pieces of patch covering in case you have a little incident with your shrink covering. That's a little bit of a spare, so you can apply a patch if you need to. And then the decals. Extreme Flight always includes some decals on their planes. You've got the Extreme Flight logo and the Slick 580 if you want to use those. Big X right there, and the orange 580 with white if you want to use that. So nicely done there. And then, of course, one of the other things that I really like about Extreme Flight planes, they always include a lovely wing bag. And believe me, when you're bringing these bigger planes to the field, having a wing bag like that is just very handy because your wings go inside and they stay protected while your wings are in storage or in the vehicle on the way to the field. That wraps up my first look at the Extreme Flight Slick 580 V2. Remember, I'll be trying a 6S power plant designed for 67-inch airplanes. It's the AM670. My theory on that is real simple. If for whatever reason that AM670 doesn't work out, I'll be happy to go get another 67-inch airframe and upgrade the motor on this to a more appropriate one. My goal, as I stated, is to try and keep this plane running a single 6S battery. And if I can accomplish that and get flight characteristics that I like, I'm going to consider that a definite win. Overall, I think you guys know how I feel about Extreme Flight planes. I really do consider them to be top shelf and probably the best money you can spend on a model airplane in the hobby today. If you like this kind of content, make sure you smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know when new videos hit the channel. YouTube should recommend another video for you right now. That's all I've got for today. Go fly something. And then on the bottom, the color scheme matches what we saw on the wings. So you've got this bright white section in the center, and then the bright color pops on the tips of the stabilizer and then on the bottom, you got the same style color scheme that we saw on the wings. You got the bright white in the center and a pop of color out here on the... And then for the bottom, you've got that same type of color scheme we saw on the wings, bright white. And then on the bottom of the stabilizer, same type of color... And on the bottom of the stabilizer, same type of color scheme that we saw on the wings, bright white in the center, color pop on the tips. You had something more to say. And then if you look inside, you can see a little bit of a cockpit. So they've got a single pane of glass. And then if you look inside, you got a little bit of a cockpit with aviation style instruments, and it looks like some kind of iMac pattern right there in the middle. That's kind of cool. And then when you look inside, you've got a cockpit with aviation style instruments. And to marry up with the servos, you do need some servo arm extensions. These are the And to marry up with the servos, you need some servo arm extensions. These are the 25 tooth. And to match up with the servos, you need some servo arm extensions. These are 1.5 inch Extreme Flight. I got mine in blue and they're 25 teeth. Well, that covers my first look at the Extreme Flight 70 inch. That covers my first look at the Extreme Flight. Well, that wraps up my first look at the Extreme Flight. That wraps up my first look at the Extreme Flight Slick 580 V2. Again, I'll be... All right, that wraps up my first look at the Extreme Flight Slick 580 V2. Again, I'll be trying a 6S power plant, and my theory on this is really simple. If the 6S power plant, meaning the 6... Well, that wraps up my first look at the Extreme Flight Slick...